Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name is Savannah, if you're new here. If you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is Wednesday. I almost said Tuesday. It is Wednesday, June the 2nd, and today I am joined by what might be a familiar face to you. This is our own Huntsville reporter, Ashley Rimkus. Ashley is here today to talk about several things that have been happening with Huntsville police recently, and not exactly a positive look at this either. Now, we have two incidents that Huntsville police have been dealing with. And number one is going to be the conviction of William Darby. Now, William, he also goes by Ben Darby, was a Huntsville police officer who was convicted in May of murder after last year shooting, or not last year, excuse me, 2018. The years are just starting to really run together. In 2018 of killing a man. He was convicted again in May. He is being sentenced in August. He has not been fired from Huntsville police. So we're going to get into that in a minute, but we also have another Huntsville police situation to talk about in a bit. And that is a video that surfaced on Sunday night of, I believe his name is Kamante Hobbs, if we're mispronouncing that, excuse me, but of Kamante Hobbs, who was being arrested in a Huntsville gas station, and a video that appeared to show a Huntsville police officer stomping on Kamante's leg. Now, we're going to get to that in a minute. First, we're going to talk about the conviction of Ben Darby and what has happened since that conviction. So, Ashley, I know that you covered this trial extensively, and since then, you've really covered the aftermath. So, tell us about Ben Darby, and we know he's been convicted, but what is he doing now?
So I think that's the question that's on a lot of minds across the state, and certainly here in Huntsville. As you said, Officer Darby was convicted, found guilty of murder back on May 7th by a Madison County jury. He, at this point, is still an employee of the city of Huntsville. Now, the way the city has explained this is that he is on leave. Time that he had accrued, leave time, through his employment there. He, of course, has remained an employee of the police department ever since this shooting happened back in 2018. Now, the reason why there has not been a disciplinary hearing, or what we expect in this case, of course, a termination decision, the city's answer for that is essentially that once he was convicted, he made the decision to go on leave, and that because he did that, essentially that their hands are tied, that they had scheduled a hearing to do the disciplinary hearing, but that once he chose to go on leave, that they had to basically indefinitely postpone the hearing. Now, we took that, information from the city to lawyers, experts on employment law, and they do seem pretty skeptical about that. We spoke to one attorney here in Huntsville who, told me that he has dealt with, these sorts of employment cases involving city employees for over a decade, and he had never seen a situation like this where someone was essentially able to avoid such a hearing by going on leave. So it really is sort of a confusing and sort of head-scratching situation. Officer Darby has been stripped of his law enforcement certification, so he is not, legally able to perform law enforcement duties in the state. So it is. It's a little bit confusing, but the city's citing some privacy concerns as one of the reasons why they're not saying what type of leave he's on, right? They're not saying like he's on, accrued sick pay or, that, or whether it's like, regular old, just PTO. The city attorney did tell me he is not on vacation, for what that's worth. But that's about the best information that we have right now, is that he's just on leave.
Now, I think something that a lot of people will wonder, Ashley, is why did this person who's convicted of murder in May, why did this person get to make the decision to take leave after that? Why was he even allowed to have that decision after such a lofty conviction in May to kind of, as you said, not necessarily saying that he's skirting the system here. We don't know that, but that's what it kind of appears to be. And there doesn't appear to be a reason why he was able to put on leave. Now, you mentioned that he is not able to practice law enforcement anymore. His certification has been stripped. So even if he is still technically an employee of the police department. He's not really a police officer because he doesn't have the proper certification. So it leads you to ask, number one, why was he able to make that decision to go on leave? And number two, is he being paid? And number three, what is he doing that he gets to be paid for his once job as a police officer that he no longer holds the qualifications to do that job?
Right. So for a little bit of background, to kind of put this in a little bit of context. So the shooting, he killed Jeff Parker back in April of 2018. After that, he was put on like admin leave or admin duty, basically desk duty. The police department did its internal review. The police department in Huntsville actually investigates its own officer-involved shootings. So when the police kill someone here, the police department investigates that. That might soon change. We can get to that in a bit. But so after that, in this case, the review board of the police department, did a vote, cleared Officer Darby of wrongdoing, said they had looked into it and that they believed he followed his training, that he acted within policy, and so he was reinstated. That happened about a month, maybe a little bit more after the shooting in April of 2018. Fast forward to August, the DA's office.
August of 2018 or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, of 2018, takes the case to a grand jury, and the grand jury returns the indictment for murder. At that point, the city did not initiate, disciplinary hearing, did not, fire him. That they stood by Officer Darby. They said that they believed that he had done what he was trained to do. And so what they did is they put him on desk duty, which is often, in sort of the city and government speak, admin duty. It just basically means you're still working, but you're not on the streets, right? You're not arresting people, patrolling, that kind of thing. And so that's where he was from August of 2018 until really, I guess, until he went on leave, right? After the conviction, he was on desk duty. Once he's convicted, the city really still stood by him. The mayor said that he, respected the jury, but that he disagreed with the verdict. The police chief here, Mark McMurray, said he does not believe that Officer Darby is a murderer. So you see that the city has, from day one, defended and stood by him. So we get to the conviction, right? The chief has to notify a post, which certifies law enforcement officers. They do strip him of, his law enforcement certification. The city says it schedules this disciplinary hearing, but that when Officer Darby chose to go on leave, they had to cancel it. Now, for another sort of, I guess, piece of context around that. Again, we don't know what type of leave he is on. We don't know if it's sick leave. We don't know if it's FMLA. We don't know if it's just, unused holidays or vacation day. We don't know. But what I can say is that attorneys that we interviewed told us that were a city employee, such as Officer Darby, to choose to take sick leave, or to, for whatever reason, be on something like FMLA, that they could be entitled to have that disciplinary hearing postponed. That could be something that helps explain why he has not had that hearing yet. Does that sort of make sense the way I described that? I know that was a lot.
No, it does. But, I think that two questions to come out of that. And number one is he still getting a paycheck from the city?
Well, so if he's using his accrued leave time, then I would think so, right? I mean, you get paid time off. So yes, I mean, that's the way that I understand it, is that he is not actively working and earning a paycheck. What he's drawing is what's already entitled to him. So for example, if the city had scheduled a disciplinary hearing last week, and it had been determined, that he should be fired, for example, then the city would still owe him his accrued time. That's your property. Like, as a government employee, what you earn as far as your leave time, that's your property. And so if they separate from you, they would have to pay that. Now, there are some different, federal, laws and guidelines and rules and local policies around sick time versus your other accrued pay. But that's my understanding, is that essentially he would have been able to take that with him, but they would cut him a check, right? Instead of it not happening now.
So it's almost, to be determined if he's getting a paycheck or not, because we don't know the type of leave that Officer Darby is on, or former Officer Darby at this point. Then we don't really know if he's being paid or not. Is that fair?
Right. I mean, I would say that he is getting paid something for the accrued time. It's just not totally clear to me what type of compensation it is, whether it's sick pay or whether it's just sort of, now the city attorney did say he's not on vacation, but whether it's just sort of what we think of as that, right, PTO. It's just not totally clear to me what pot of money it's coming from, if that makes sense. He's not on unpaid leave. I can say that. He's not on unpaid leave, if that makes sense.
Right. Now, we know that that Mr. Darby's sentencing is in August, and August 20th, I believe, is the scheduled date right now. So whether or not that disciplinary hearing for the police department happens before then, it's fair to say after that date, that August 20th date, he won't be able to be working because he will presumably be serving time for this murder conviction.
Correct. And, a lot of people have been asking about the sentence. And so I'm actually glad that you brought that up. I think this is a good chance to talk about that a little bit. In Alabama, for the crime of which he was convicted, murder with a firearm, the minimum sentence is 20 years. Now, that can be a little bit misleading. There's a lot of latitude within that, right? That could be a 20-year split sentence. That could be 20 years straight, just prison sentence. That could be a lot of different things. And at this point, we have no indication of what the judge might try to, do with that, what her sentence might be. I would suspect that we're probably not looking at the kind of case where, and I could be wrong, but I would suspect we're probably not looking at the kind of case where we're looking at a split sentence, because that includes probation. And just given the facts, this doesn't really seem like the kind of case where anybody would benefit from an extended probation after a prison stint. But yeah, so the 20 years does not automatically, though, mean that it would be 20 years in prison minimum. Certainly possible, but that's just sort of, I'm glad you asked about that to kind of give the chance to explain that.
The bottom line on Ben Darby, again, convicted of murder in May for the April 2018 shooting. Now, he's convicted in May, will not be sentenced to August. The short answer here is, or the short question rather, is, has he been terminated from the police department? No, he is still an employee of the city. So that is, that's a little bit of a place where we can catch up on Ben Darby. We know there's a lot happening there. Unfortunately, everything's kind of in the air there. We do not have any sort of disciplinary hearing scheduled for Ben Darby, and the sentencing is not until August the 20th. So right now we are really just kind of hanging out in the air on that one.
One thing that I think is worthy of noting too is that, as I was working on this story, kind of an update on where that stands, I had reached out to the law firm that is representing Officer Darby in his, employment situation. He has a separate team for that from his criminal, defense team. And I just think it's worth noting that, we asked them for comment, we asked them if they would like to speak to us for the story, sort of explain, frankly, help people understand what's going on here. And they said that they did not want to speak, that we should speak to the city. And I think that was noteworthy, given that, you kind of expected a termination hearing would be sort of adversarial, that Darby's lawyers, deferred to, please speak to the city about this. I just thought that was worth noting.
And we have extensive coverage of Ben Darby's trial that you provided for us, Ashley, all on AL.com. I've got one story linked here, but if you are interested, you can kind of follow that back in through the links and find the full coverage of that trial there as well. Now, something else that we want to have a few minutes to talk about here, and that is something that happened on Sunday. I believe it was Sunday night when a Facebook video surfaced, and this was of the arrest of Kamante Hobbs. Now, Kamante Hobbs, we have since learned. He is, I believe, 22 years old. He was subsequently charged with obstructing governmental operations and resisting arrest. He was arrested at a Huntsville area gas station. I believe it was Mapco. Now, on Sunday night, what makes this something that we're talking about is on Sunday night, a video surfaced on Facebook. I believe it was a Facebook Live video, and it showed Kamante being arrested. He was on the ground, and there was an officer on top of him who was handcuffing him. Now, it is a little hard to hear exactly what's going on, but at some point, multiple officers rush over and begin to subdue him, I guess is a fair word to say, and to help the officer who was initially on top of Kamante handcuff him. In this incident, you see one of the officers begin apparently to stomp on Kamante's leg. And I will link that story here in our coverage of Kamante as well by our own Connor Jones. I will link that here. So if you would like to watch the video, you can. But that is, that's another issue now. Huntsville police are already dealing with the non-termination of Ben Darby, with people being a little bit outraged that Ben Darby is still an employee of the city of Huntsville. Then you add this into the mix, Ashley. This is just another not good look for Huntsville police. So we've seen the video. You and I have seen the video. We've got it on AL.com. People can go watch it. After the incident, Kamante did appear to stand up and walk out of the gas station, which honestly was a little bit surprising to me. But in the days since, we have had a follow-up from Connor Sheets, and I'll read you what that said. The main point of that there was that Kamante's mother says he has been released from jail and that he was not badly injured, which is kind of surprising, Ashley, if you see that video. But what does this mean for Huntsville police? I know you might have some sort of information on what the police department has said since that incident. But what does that mean for police? They're already dealing with Ben Darby. Now they've got this.
Well, and just to back up, I mean, you mentioned that, his mother said that, his injuries weren't that bad. And, the family has hired an attorney. Martin Weinberg, a Birmingham area civil rights attorney, is looking into the case. And they say that, their goal here is to try to make sure that nothing like this ever happens again. They are concerned that there was excessive force used. And one of the things that the attorney said yesterday was that this could have been a lot worse, right? That Kamante's injuries, Mr. Hobbs' injuries, could have been a lot worse. As you mentioned, I think obviously, the video was very widely watched. I think the video is probably the reason why we know about this case. But it also does come, as you pointed out, when there's already a lot of, questions and pressure and calls for change around the police department here in Huntsville. And yes, you have, the Darby case. But really, I think you have to go back to a year ago this week to the protests here about, protests against, police violence and racial injustice. 1 year ago this week, we saw, clouds of tear gas on the courthouse square in downtown. Multiple law enforcement agencies joined with the Huntsville Police Department to police the protests. When people were gathered there demonstrating and didn't go home, the tear gas, flashbangs, rubber bullets, snipers on the courthouse roof, helicopters flying over downtown, drones, there's just all of this, police response. The riot gear was used to get people to leave the protest, to leave the square. And since then, there have been, relentless, calls for change, calls for accountability in the police department, calls for the chief to resign or to be fired by the mayor. Those are all conversations that have been going on here in town since a year ago. And those calls have only grown louder since the Darby case and now since this video, since other incidents in which, people were killed by police here in the city. And so, one of the things that we did last week was, given these calls, for the chief to resign or be fired, we asked the mayor and we asked every member of the city council to sort of weigh in on that. And essentially the mayor said that he supports the chief. He does not have any plans for, change in the top leadership in the department. One city council member, the council president, actually, Dr. Jenny Robinson, was very clear that she supports the mayor and the chief. But the rest of the city council members were more reluctant, more hesitant to really, say what they thought about the chief and about his future here. So I think really things are kind of in limbo, right? There's just a big question mark on what happens next. How does the city move forward? Does the city make changes? Does the city, make reforms? It's just really a big question mark, I think, right now. And this, most recent incident involving Mr. Hobbs is just really just making the calls for change louder and the pressure on City Hall louder.
And I think that is interesting. And in that follow-up story from Connor Sheets here, it's interesting to note that Mr. Hobbs's mother actually says that the Huntsville police, this is again according to his mother, says that Huntsville police are aware that Mr. Hobbs is a man who suffers from a certain type of mental illness. And she says they are aware of that. And I think that actually makes her question the actions of police a little bit more. So several things going on here in Huntsville. I know we've got a lot of questions here, and we will get to them. We will answer them in the comments as well. But Ashley, thank you so much for coming, giving us an update on Ben Darby, giving us an update on what is happening with Mr. Hobbs's case, and also just what's happening with Huntsville police in general. We know there's a lot of situations up in that department that we are going to be following.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Ashley, thank you. Everybody watching, thank you so much. I appreciate it. We'll see you tomorrow.